As you look over those notes and remind yourself from last week, we're just talking about some thoughts. It seems as though Solomon here just sharing some thoughts on daily living, several different categories. Last week we talked about some thoughts on the wine at your table. And wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging. If you're deceived by it, you're a fool, all right? You're not wise. So let us not imbibe is the bottom line. Let us not imbibe. Now, point number 2 is where we're starting tonight. Point number 2. Some thoughts on the kings in your life. You say, well, I don't have a king. Well, those in authority over you. I think the principles apply there directly. And so what are some thoughts that Solomon has about the kings in our life? And if you are in a role or a place where you make decisions that affect other people, well, then these principles are for you as well. So look at verse 2. There's where we start. Proverbs 20, verse 2. The fear of a king is as the roaring of a lion. Whoso provoketh him to anger sinneth against his own soul. Just as you'd be afraid if you heard a young, irritated lion roar, right? So fear the king. All right? He does have authority. Fear him. Don't go beyond the boundaries of a king's will. It will lead to your punishment. This is funny because I wasn't thinking about this verse directly when I gave my spiel just a little bit ago about what our involvement are, all right? But here we have it in black and white. It is the character of the follower of God to be submissive. To the authority. We know our place. We know our role. And so as we deal with a civil authority, or if we can even liken this to another authority, whether it's in the workplace, in your home, wherever you may be, make sure that the boss, you live within his rules. You may not like his rules, but if his rules don't cause you to sin, live within the rules. Because if you don't, what does it say at the end of the verse? You're sinning against your own soul. You're being rather dumb, right? Now, stop and consider. And we talk about this when we get into the New Testament as well. But in the culture of the Old Testament, the culture of the New Testament, there were plenty of Christians or followers of God in the Old Testament who didn't have a lot of freedom like we have. One of the options that's before a Christian today is if you have a bad king, whatever that position is, boss or politician, we have options to change that. You don't like your job and don't like the guy you have to work for, or the gal you have to work for? Well, in America, you can change jobs, all right? And sometimes that actually may be wise, all right? But there are times too, but in the Old Testament, New Testament, that wasn't always the case. One of the thoughts as I think about church life is that in the New Testament time, you generally, and it changed over time, but you generally had one church in town that was preaching the gospel. Talk about learning to get along and figuring out your differences and loving and following the Lord together. That's pretty significant. And that same character should be that way in our church. So same thing in this relationship with your king, whoever that is and whatever that relationship. Live within the rules that he sets up. It may not be nice. It may not be your favorite. But you're sinning against your soul if you're always barking at or pushing against the king. Okay? Verse 8. Let's go down there. A king that sitteth in the throne of judgment scattereth away all evil with his eyes. The throne from which justice flows winnows out evil. It gets rid of it, divides, it separates. It winnows out evil by careful mental and spiritual examination. That's that word judgment there. So what Solomon here is exalting, now stop and consider. He's talking to a son who, if we speak specifically of Rehoboam, hey, Rehoboam, you're going to be a king one day. You're going to follow in my footsteps. Listen, son. You be a king that gives out wise and good judgment. And what will happen is that you'll winnow away evil. Remember, Solomon comes to the throne. God gives him great wisdom. And then God demonstrates it. And remember that those two prostitutes come. They're living together. And they both have children. and the one sleeps on her baby and it kills the baby, the other one doesn't, so she steals the baby. You remember how that all went. And what do? You've got, it's her word against her word. And how do you make, and God used Solomon to demonstrate wise judgment. It seemed, what's this guy doing? Cut this baby in half? No, that's not what he's doing at all. He's determining who's the real mother. Whoa, that's really wise. Now, if you are in a place of leadership, there are times where you need you need God's wisdom for making those kind of choices. In any kind of judgment call, all right, the word judgment here in the verse 8, all right, any kind of judgment call, there's usually two sides. And you're called to make a judgment about it. What should you do? Well, you ask God for wisdom, that the Lord will help you discern the truth. As I counsel families at times, it's like, Lord, this is beyond me. I need your help to determine where the real problem is. Because a lot of times you're only getting half the story. All right? And so when your homes, fathers here, as you act in a place of leadership in your home, there are times I'll walk into the room and Drew and Dory have something going on, and it's like I've got it pegged. I know what's happening immediately. And then I discover I didn't. Because I thought I saw one thing and it really wasn't that, or I heard one half of the story and didn't get the full front end of the whole thing. Be careful to get the full story to make the wise, right judgment. Because when justice flows from an authority figure, it will push away evil. And it'll help. So, for instance, in the home, Dad, you make the right call in disciplining your children rightly. Both those kids in that dispute learn what's evil and what's good. And they'll second guess the next time they want to do that evil. Whereas they see you as a random, just angry for a moment, and you're not careful, that all that does is not only promote the evil that was just done because it doesn't get punished properly, but it causes the innocent party to get angry and say, what's the use of doing good? I'm going to get punished anyway. And so you take that out to the nth degree. Obviously, we talk about that in our country all the time. Something about classified documents. There you go. You're talking about all right, you understand. And there will be people that will say, why should I even try to do good? Well, we do good as believers because it pleases the Lord. But you understand authority is really important. So if you have a role and responsibility in your workplace, be careful. Be careful. Do all you can to make just and wise judgments, so that then the true wrong is pushed aside and righteousness is allowed to flourish. All right? Really important. Okay, verse number 26. Let's run down there. A wise king scattereth the wicked and bringeth the weal over them. So it's an outgrowth of verse 8. But a wise king detects and punishes the wicked. He uses even the weal. Now, this is, sometimes when you're harvesting grain, there are times, depending on the grain, where you just throw it in the air. You winnow it, all right, and let the wind blow the chaff away and the seed falls. But there are other grains that doesn't work for. So you run a wheel over it to crush off the husks. And really the threshing process, I mean, you remember the olden days, and still you can go to the county fairs and get a threshery going, all right? The threshing machine hit the wheat heads to knock the seed out away from the husks. That's the picture here, that a good king will knock, all right, will winnow out wickedness and get rid of it. If I could maybe run down verse 30, all right, verse 30. The blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil, so do stripes the inward parts of the belly. Boy, if this is not politically correct in our day and age at all, but it is God's word. Corporal punishment, the bruising wound, is a remedy for evil. So are blows They actually help fix the inner nature, the mental faculties, the person of a man. One of the terrible things, do you stop and think, let me question you for a second. Think through the Old Testament system that God set up for the nation of Israel and the criminal system there. So the question is, did Israel have prisons? They didn't. Well, what did they do with all the criminals? The blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil, so do stripes, the inward parts of the belly. Yeah, and those that committed murder were gone. Right, yeah, exactly. Isn't that interesting? Now, it seems as though God usually does everything well and right, correct? Has he ever made a mistake? So I realize, okay, are we going on some kind of prison reform here tonight? No, not necessarily. But where you can influence, it is proper and right for corporal punishment. One of the joys of the process of spanking is that it's done. If it's matched rightly with the wrong, with the crime, all right, disobedience, whatever, and there's corporal punishment within reason, all of that. But it's delightful. Not only is it a release for the criminal, in your home it's the child, all right, because it's done and taken care of, and then they have the love of mom and dad again. But it's also done for the king, the authority. My life is full. I don't have enough capacity to keep track of all the prison notes for my children. All right, did they spend 30 minutes in the corner? Do you understand some of the practical reason for this? So then it's rightly done for the authority as well, and we can go on. And by the way, in the home situation, then I can be the loving father I'm supposed to be. So it takes care of the punishment for the crime, and then gives opportunity for instructions. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. I have known very few timeouts that don't create wrath in the child, ultimately. All right, now there may be times where we redirect. This is a part of the nurturing process, all right? The child's starting to get into trouble. It's like they're right on the verge of being a criminal. But they haven't quite reached that yet. Well, why don't you help and redirect their steps, all right? Maybe hand them a book and have a quiet time that way, all right? Does that make sense? Redirect their thinking. No problem. But let us not use our punishment to create frustration in our children. Provoke not your children to wrath. Bring them up in the nurture, the training, admonition, teaching of the Lord. Anyways, so this goes all the way back to a king. I realize that we have many, many laws in our country so if you're in a position in authority in a workplace, corporal punishment won't work. I understand that it gets you in trouble. But do everything you can to direct where there's crime and punishment that needs to be handed out, take care of it, and be done and over with it, so that you can go on and get the work accomplished. A king will be careful to do that. Okay, and then let's go on to verse number 28 as well. Mercy and truth preserve the king, and his throne is upholden by mercy. Now, here's the wonderful balance to all that I've said thus far about winnowing out, wheeling over, the blueness of a wound, all of those things. Mercy, loyal love, all right? That's my, if I can put it, my favorite translation of that Hebrew word. Loyal love and truth guard the king's reign. A king, a person in authority, as he demonstrates actually a personal relationship with those that he leads, and gives those he leads truth. Guess what it does? Well, his throne is upholden. It gives him. Stop and think of King David. 40 years reigning, and he was a merciful king. Now, he had sins and problems, I understand. But the character of his reign was one of mercy and goodness. He loved his people, he loved his God, and it affected the relationships and his authority. To this day, the children of Israel look forward to having a King David again. Now, what an amazing testimony, all right? Think of Jesus Christ, of course, who is going to be, he should be the king of your heart already, all right? But one day will rule and reign on this earth with a rod of iron. Don't miss that, all right? There will be judgment for sin. And yet he's their Savior at the same time. So let me, again, making it very practical where we can influence in our positions of authority, teachers in the school, men and ladies in business and so forth. Demonstrate. Let me put it this way. When I was a youth pastor, I knew full well that if I tried to be one of them, tried to be the cool youth pastor, of course that's out of my realm. I just can't be cool, right? I'm weird. That's just life, all right? So anyways, but to try to be their pal would not accomplish much spiritual work. But they had better know that Pastor Dave absolutely loved them because I wanted them to grow in the Lord. And so you built personal relationship, you were trying to be there in time of need, but in the midst of doing that, you were always teaching truth. If there was anything I wanted the youth group to ever say about Pastor Dave was, well, if you ask him a question, he's always going to pull his Bible out and give you the answer from the Bible. And I hope that you find that here too, by the way, folks. I have no authority but what's here. And if we grow in the Lord together because your pastor loves you and is giving you truth, not giving you his opinions, but giving you truth, we're the better for it. All of us. Now, it might allow for me in the role as pastor here to have a long ministry. I hope so. But that's critical. So dads and moms in the home, it's so important. I realize when they're 5 or 6, the reason is because Dad said so. And that's good enough. That's all they need, and they understand that. With Drew and Dora, I'm in these delightful years. I wish they would never end, but they will. All right? Delightful years where Dad's the hero. All right? He can do no wrong almost. All right? It's a little bit of love, and it goes a long way, and anyways. But Drew one day will become a teenager. I hope that I've won his heart well enough, and there will come a point at which I've got to do a lot of explaining. Why is it that Dad says we need to do it this way? What is it about the Word of God that directs Dad to make that choice? I've got to give them truth. Now, if that happens well and rightly, even if they have a heart of rebellion, there will still be this long relationship with Dad. And in the workplace, and in the school, and in the church. Sunday school teachers here, don't just teach on Sunday morning. And I'm probably preaching to the choir in some respects. Love those kids in every opportunity you have. You have just a few years with them, and then they go on to the next teacher, all right? Give your heart to them. Loyal love, but with truth. We're not just about pals. I don't want everybody to say they like me. That's not the goal. The goal is to uphold truth, to have a relationship that's healthy with the Lord involved, all right? And that relationship will last and have eternal effects. So you look back in your own life, and those who loved you but gave you truth are usually the ones that you still have dear, dear thoughts about. And you glory in them, all right? You rejoice in that relationship. If you still know your teacher from grade school, all right, your Sunday school teacher, maybe the one that led you to the Lord and discipled you, oh man, that you uphold that relationship, right? Anyways, so it's good for kings, anybody in authority, to speak mercy, to speak truth, to live that way in their life. Okay, well, we'll stop here tonight. I won't go long. And next week we'll finish up, Lord willing, some thoughts on one other point, all right? Let's close in a word of prayer.